Johnny Fontana, Real World NF Scorpio, back with another video. This one's actually with my father. He's actually a Capricorn, also a ENTP, so he's extroverted, intuitive thinker. So that just wanted to go ahead and ask you. I know that early on, throughout the years, especially growing up and so forth. How would you sort of like characterize me or my personality when I was younger and so forth and so on, in terms of me being a little bit more reserved, a little bit, more sort of behind the scenes and so forth?
Well, when you say younger, I don't know how far back we go.
Like 9, 10.
But you were always very shy, reserved, as you said, and but obviously because of circumstances.
Yeah.
Because at first you were at your mom's house, and I would pick you up on weekends, every other weekend.
Yeah.
Therefore, it wasn't as though you were with me all the time, so that could have been one of the reasons.
Yeah.
Although I suspect that even there, you were also reserved until the time I decided it was appropriate for me to have you come and live with me and have full custody.
Got you. Monsieur, how are you sort of, because I know that early on I was sort of intense and always asking questions and so forth. How do you think you sort of guided that? Because I know you are more of the T-type. So although you have the intuition, but did you see it early on, and did you try to sort of like guide it in a way that you knew, like sometimes I would try to go for more information or sort of like try to pry too much? Is there a way that, or a time where you actually said, you know what, I think he has a little bit of what I have, but maybe he's not as developed? There's any way that, or any time that you thought maybe go ahead and try to sort of, because I know often we've had these discussions and you would say, hey, you know what, I wouldn't do this, I wouldn't do that. Or sometimes I would come up with some big ideas and you say, hey, let's go ahead and just focus, don't go so wild and so forth.
Well, it was a process. Keep in mind that there are only 20 years between us.
Yeah.
So obviously at first, in a way, I was growing up with you.
Gotcha, yeah.
And I think I was a bit of a disciplinarian, going back to, I suppose, the way my parents were with me.
Yeah.
And so I felt that it was important to guide you, to instill in you the principles that I felt were the right ones, right or wrong. But obviously with time, as you also had your siblings who were younger, it makes it harder for a parent to try to handle 4 kids at a time when you're of a certain age. And therefore, there is a little bit of a military style. In other words, when it came to things like meals, it wasn't by menu, as it is done nowadays almost. Everybody, if I wanted pepperoni pizza, everybody had that. But in your case, as you were the eldest, obviously special attention had to be given, because first of all, you were going to be an example to your siblings who looked up to you. And you were living with us, and it wasn't your mother but a stepmother, so I also had to be on the lookout for those things. Gotcha. And try to give you the proper guidance, and in fact having you go through tutoring.
Let me ask you, I mean, some of the characteristics and abilities I've garnered and developed over the years, I think I've obviously gotten them from you. How would you characterize your intuition in terms of dealing with people, being able to read people throughout your business endeavors and so forth, and just your social interactions?
Well,
And where do you think that also comes from as well? Like your chameleon style, because you know how, like I said, being a police officer, being brought up in the better part of northern New Jersey, also from Queens, a little bit more of an urbanized area. At the same time, having that military exposure of dealing with people from the outdoors and so forth and so on, so we can sort of address people under different circumstances. So how would you say you've developed your intuition and also being able to interact within different social circles?
I'm a strong believer that we are what we live.
Mm-hmm.
And I was born in Haiti, but lived very little there. My father was French, worked for the French government. And, well, when I say French, he had also a mixed background, but he was born in France. And as a physician, he had to live also in Africa, and we were with him in different countries where he would train a local staff to eventually replace him as head of clinics. And although these countries were independent, but we were living as though they were still colonies. French schools, French clubs. So I had to adapt to all of that.
Yeah.
And I had a bit of an identity crisis because obviously of my own background and being in a totally French world, spending my summers in France, sometimes in the US with my Haitian family. So that all played a role in making me who I was even then as a young man, teenager. Then I moved to New York because as a citizen of France, I would have had to serve in the military. It was a must at the time. And my godmother, my mother's sister, invited me to live with her. So ended up there, went to school in New York, worked for almost 20 years at the United Nations, which was another school. So you put all this together, it gives you a background that is quite colorful, complex, and enriching.
Can you give an example of how, like throughout your social circles, you're able to now read people, understand, and sort of have some inclination of what's going to happen based on different business deals that you are addressing?
Well, I think I don't have any special gift, I don't think. But I believe because when I go into business, I don't go in with a hidden agenda. I am for technology, I use technology, but I like the personal approach. I like the face-to-face. We can follow up with Skype and WhatsApp or what have you. And I feel because I go in honestly, I'm able to get people to put their guards down. And I'm also used to cultures where people, instead of going straight into the business conversation or context, there's a tendency to first find out about each other, discuss certain things. And I think this is where I am best at understanding who is across from me. And they too have the same opportunity because we're talking about somewhat personal things before we enter the business matter. And that gives me an in, I think.
I know early on in your career, you used to be a little bit more straightforward, in terms of like one of the details, forgetting about the fluff and the big picture and everything. Do you think as time has changed or has gone by that you sort of taken it back and have been more relaxed in terms of allowing people to come to you with the fluff and the bigger pictures and sort of waiting for the details rather than sort of requesting them or being adamant on receiving that information right then and there. Like I said, during the business meetings, instead of getting straight to the point where you sort of, hash out some of the more personal and social issues prior to, getting into the details. Do you think over the years you've come to terms?
Well, over the years, yes, but as I said before, there's also a cultural component.
Gotcha.
When I now live in Florida, and I do business primarily with South America, and of course in South Florida. When I first moved there, I would say, the American mentality of the straight to the point approach, the boardroom, the office, the conference table. But when I moved to Florida, it was a different atmosphere, because people, as I said, first want to talk about mundane things, about family and background, and it makes it that it cannot be as to the point, especially when you are around a table and maybe having a drink or two.
Yeah.
So it forced me to change my ways, and obviously with time and experience, as you say, I've evolved with time, but my judgment also has changed. My approach.
I guess in closing, let's say you would give some advice to like a big picture thinker, approaching, anything in terms of business endeavors, just life in general, and having to sort of navigate around different social boundaries. You known me, experienced, some of my ways in contrast to yours. What advice would you give to sort of a big picture thinker in terms of approaching and navigating life and not getting too sort of caught up in the big picture, but being able to sort of ground themselves and not let all of the fluff sort of get in the way of their progress, as an advice for them?
Well, I am very similar to you in many ways, but I'm also very different.
So in what way similar?
Well, we are people's people. Okay. I like to understand people the same way you do, but we just have a different approach. Yours is more direct, is deeper, perhaps intrusive at times. I may get the same results, but I will take longer. I will have a more diplomatic approach, and I will gauge the other person to determine whether he or she would be receptive. And that's important, because otherwise I may find myself closing a door or putting people on the defensive.
Now, but is this something that you've learned and have been able to cultivate over the years?
Absolutely. After all, good judgment comes from experience, which comes from bad judgment. That's what they say, right? So, made a lot of mistakes along the way. I had my own infrastructure, 50 plus employees with independent contractors. Now I work primarily as a consultant. For me, it's no longer 6 degrees of separation, but more like 2 or 3. I can get you to meet pretty much anyone if I feel that you have the right project, and it deserves to be taken to certain people. So for me to achieve that, I have to be very cautious, I have to be loyal and very discreet, and not threatening. And I think that's good for anyone who would want to not only get involved in this line of work as a consultant, lobbyist, or whatever you may want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
As much as it is important to be firm, frank, for people to know where you stand. I'm not speaking of being a hypocrite, but yet you can't be a bull in a store of porcelain. You see, that's my approach. Again, as I said, the United Nations was a school, and it's a diplomatic school.
Yeah.
So I wear gloves.
On that note, Johnny Fontana, Real World, NF Scorpio, me and my dad, Capricorn, ENTP, we out. What's up, brother?
Well, I hope, I'm sure you'll do your thing, you edit.
Yeah.